I hope everyone is doing fine with the lunch. I know these talks are not the easiest right after having eaten, so I hope I'm not going to bore you too much. And I hope my clicker works. Yes. If you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. I have a question about Kubernetes. Who here knows Kubernetes? I expected a lot of hands. Who here thinks it's easy? Okay, thank you. So I wanted to go through a bit of a thought exercise about the ease of use of Kubernetes. So I want you to imagine creating an application, a very simple Go application, and you want to just deploy it into Kubernetes. And you just want to put that live. Who thinks that is easy? Okay, I expected a lot more hands because I think that part is actually easy. But okay, I think we have concluded that a lot of people think Kubernetes is complicated. And it is. And also at ING, we think Kubernetes is complicated. But still, we wanted to use it in the whole organization. So, this clicker does not seem to work very well. Okay, I might just use my keyboard. Hello, I'm Wouter, and for the past 4 years, I've been working together with my team on cloud adoption acceleration in ING. We built a tool to do this. We built a tool to accelerate cloud adoption, making it easier for teams to go to cloud, to migrate, and that's what my story is going to be about. My story is not just going to be about the tool that we created to do this and to accelerate it. It's also going to be about how do you manage the challenges that you have with the organization. How do you actually get the tool adopted? That's not just technical. Little funny thing about me, before I worked at ING, I actually owned my own startup. I was a game designer, a game developer. I see some frowning faces here. I see that my own colleagues from ING also didn't know this. When I was working in my own startup, a lot of the features that we were developing were very user-focused. And we had to, because if we didn't make games that were relevant for the users, they wouldn't buy them. They wouldn't play it, and the company wouldn't make any money. And this mindset I also tried to use in ING when I developed tools. So, I'm going to ask another question. Who here knows ING? Okay, quite a few. That's going to save me a bit of the explanation of what we do. But we're a bank. We're quite a big bank. We have more than 37 million customers in more than 40 different countries. And as you can see here on the map, we are active in a lot of continents and a lot of different countries. Not just with what we call retail, with customer bank, how you use your bank card, but also in different markets and different segments. And obviously, this makes our IT landscape quite complicated. Because with all these different business demands, we have a lot of different business requests. And if you want to fulfill this IT, you might want to go fast and go alone. And that's not what we wanted. Just a quick question. How many engineers do you think ING has? And my colleagues, please don't answer. Anyone wants to guess? A few thousands, yeah? 25, that's 25,000 or 25? 25,000, yeah. Okay, well, it's in the middle. We have more than 10,000 engineers. We are quite a big tech company. And with that also comes a lot of challenges in how you actually manage tech in such a big company. I have another question. I would like you to raise your hand if you agree with the following statement. We have departments in our company that slow down our feature development. Thank you. And I want you to raise a fist if this one is true. New innovative ideas get adopted not fast enough in our organization. Okay. So if both of those are true, this presentation is going to be very interesting for you. If one of them is true, half the presentation is still going to be very interesting for you. So one of the ways that we do tool adoption or technology adoption in ING is with the tech adoption model. And this is a model that's actually based on the strategy map from LexisNexis from organizational physics. I'm not sure if everyone heard about it, but this is a guy who focuses a lot about how startups, organizations develop during time and what kind of different things they have to do. And this is why I'm so passionate about it, because I used to have my own startup and I recognize a lot of the things in going through the different phases. So we remap this actually on the way we adopt technologies in ING. We have two axes. We have the organizational stability. That is how stable your organization is going to be. So through the time, your organization will always become more stable. But you have to be aware that in the beginning, you're going to be unstable, and that's fine. And on the other axis, we have the organizational development. That's in how much development are you going to put in changing your organization or stabilizing that organization. And we have a couple of phases. The first phase is the spotted phase. This is actually where you're going to spot problems. This is where new technologies comes in. This is where you're going to think about opportunities for your company. And this is done by the thinkers. The next phase is I have to do it at the same time. The next phase is the piloted phase. This is where you're going to pilot new technologies. And this is done by the innovators. Then we go to the next phase, which is to build it. That's where you're going to build your tool, or you're going to adopt real technology in your company. And that's done by the early adopters. The next phase, that's the holy grail of tool adoption, is the scale it phase. Now you want the whole company to use that new tool or that new technology. And that's done by the early majority. And then we have two phases left. One of them is the operated phase. Here we just want to run the tool or the technology, so we don't want to do too much anymore. And obviously, at the end, we want to kill it. Because maybe there is a better technology out there, and you want to replace it. And always good to keep in mind, when you adopt a new technology, it's not going to be there forever. Now, let's go to the spotted phase. As I said before, this is the phase which is all about opportunities. This is where your new opportunities get found, and you really want to solve a problem. You can look around. What kind of problems do we have currently in the company? Can it be solved with certain technologies? Do we have to create something? And you can also think about reducing waste. I think we all have a lot of complexity that shouldn't have to be there in the companies that we work in. And the spotted phase can be split up in actually two different approaches. We have the top-down approach, and this is something that you can think of when you have a strategy team in a company and you think about, okay, what are the next challenges of the company going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? What are the new technologies going to be? They can also, they normally tend to think very long term, and they can think about standardizing company, reducing risk, reducing waste, basically making the company more efficient or making it ready for the next step in the market to stay relevant. There are a couple of challenges with this stage. One of them is getting your idea across. That you have a strategy team, that doesn't mean that they actually know a lot about what's happening in that huge company. And that's a challenge for these teams. They have to be very involved. Aligning the organization, meeting expectations. Sometimes the strategy team actually has a very good idea, and the whole organization says, that's great, we want it tomorrow. But it's not there yet, the idea just came in. And that's a big challenge for top-down approaches. An example of one of these top-down approaches is actually how we manage cloud in ING. Funny, I was at the talk from Monzo, from Suhail yesterday, and he said that some companies are actually large enough to have their own cloud. Well, ING is one of those companies where we built our own cloud. We call it IPC, the ING Private Cloud, and in the IPC we have something called the ICHP, the ING Container Hosting Platform. It's running on OpenShift, and this really came from a strategic point of view. At some point, we knew cloud was going to come, and we need to be ready for it. So we made a plan, we made an architecture, and we started building it. And by the time cloud came, well, I mean, we were not the first ones, but we were ready. We have something called the namespace as a service. That means that every team can request a namespace, and then they can do the things in their namespace what they want. And they don't have to bother with all the underlying infrastructure. They don't have to bother with the compliance risk which was there, which you have to do a lot with when you're working in a bank. This solved a very big problem that our engineers had. So a lot of engineers were very excited about using this. And this is also one of the challenges that we had. We had so many engineers that wanted to use it that it was very difficult to really meet all those expectations. On the other side, we have the bottom-up approach. And the bottom-up approach, obviously coming from the bottom, is coming from the teams. These are more tactical solutions. Let's say the team has a certain task they want to get rid of. They want to automate it. They have things they don't like doing. This is also a lot from innovation from within. So the team thinks, you know, if we do this, we can speed up our work, we can reduce our waste, and we can improve things. And that's the bottom-up approach. Now, obviously, there are also challenges with that. One of the challenges is that these teams have to reuse instead of recreate. If you give teams too much freedom to innovate, they're going to build tools which maybe already exist in a similar form. And that's very difficult to manage, especially if you have more than 10,000 engineers in the company. They have to be prepared to throw away their project. Maybe two teams start building the same tool at the same time. They don't know about each other. They can be on the other side of the world. But when it's time to go for one project to do it globally, the teams do have to be aware about that brainchild that you created, you might just have to get rid of it. And that's a very painful process. And you have to be aware of these other things going on, the similar initiatives. An example of a top-down approach is actually templating solutions. When you create a template, you can remove a lot of the complexity which is underneath, and you can make it easier for your fellow engineers to actually use technology. But similar like scripting, when you create these things, other people can easily reuse it, and you can just speed up the tasks that you are doing. And this is also one of the things we did in accelerating our cloud adoption. Now, very short, we had the two different approaches. We have the top-down solution, the top-down approach with the challenges, and we have the bottom-up approach with the different challenges. And when you manage to combine these two approaches, you get the middle-out strategy. Now, this is really the sweet spot where you want to be with your challenges, because this means that not only from top down, people understand it, people want to go for it, but also from bottom up, people, they accept the solutions and they want to go for it. This is normally where you find the solutions which people don't really argue about. One of the things, going to cloud with the whole company, everybody said from the top down, said, yes, it's going to reduce our costs, it's going to reduce our risk, let's do it. From bottom up cloud, people, the engineers said, yeah, this is going to save me so much time. Now, the difficulty about middle-out solutions is you actually have to find each other. And these two parties, one of them, the bottom-up, they're everywhere, and one of the top-down, they're somewhere. They don't always connect. A way to solve that is by approaching communities. I assume we all have these kind of communities in our company. Maybe you have a back-end guild, a security community, a front-end platform team. They are very involved into what's going on. And it's very important to use these kind of communities to understand what is currently happening and what is currently a need inside the company. So we've dealt with the spotted phase. Let's say we found an opportunity, we found a problem, now we want to actually go and solve it. And the next phase is the piloted phase. In the pilot phase, you're going to develop. And you're going to pilot your solution. And it's very important to really do user-driven development. You want to fix that problem for a user. So it's really important to always think about that user, involve that user, try to build it around them. This is also the time where you want to validate all the assumptions that you've made. You might not be able to do that because there can be quite a few, but in the spotted phase, you made a lot of assumptions. And it's very important to validate these as you go on. You want to get some early feedback from the experts because there are definitely people in your organization that have a lot of knowledge and experience about this. And this is the time to really approach them. And maybe make a simple demo to get some sponsors aboard. Because you might need some people to actually be freed up to work on this, or you might need to hire a team. And then it's important to get your sponsors on board to also vouch for you. And yeah, obviously you have to fail fast because If you have a pilot and you want to find out if it actually works, if it doesn't work, you throw it away and you start over. You shouldn't push for that solution just because you think it's good. Maybe it doesn't work. Things to keep in mind is you have to think about scale it early on. The goal is always to have your organization use it and to not only look at your team or your department adopting it. And this might seem a bit counterintuitive because sometimes you want to let a product grow to scale, but it's a useful one to keep in mind. And you have to be okay starting over. One of the things that we piloted in ING when we did cloud adoption is to standardize the pipelines that we have. Now we realized in one of the spotted phases that this is a bit how our generic pipeline looks like. You build, you test, you publish, scan, you deploy. And when we look at the different teams, that is quite similar. And then when we look at this green box, this is actually very similar. And you might think, you might have teams that say, yeah, but my build process is a little bit different. I use a different tool, or I have these different configurations that I need. They're not that different as they might think. They're actually quite similar. And this is also what we thought. And this is one thing that we found out during our pilot phase. The result of this was that we built templates for this. For each of these stages, we built a template of which we said, we think this is the standard. We think this is what the people want. And during our pilot phase, we also realized that a lot of people actually wanted this. People wanted to use this, and people wanted to start testing it. And that led to a product that kept complexity away from the teams. So really, it was an added benefit for the teams. It speed up their adoption to the cloud, because this was for teams that were not using our cloud hosting platform yet, and they were running on virtual machines. But with this solution, this migration went from months, it went to days. Because all they had to do was run their existing application through these templates, and they had everything that they needed. And we had still the ability to very easily make changes for the future. Because it didn't mean that we didn't just want to give them one project and now good luck, go for it. No, we said we will maintain this. And if any time in the future something changes, we will take care of that too. And it was very useful when we wanted to implement new features like canary deployments, or we wanted at some point to implement a network policy for everyone. We just put it in there. Most teams didn't even realize, and they didn't have to realize. We didn't want them to think about it. But their applications all kept working. Another example is node anti-affinity. I'm not sure if anyone used it. I really recommend it. But it's not default if you deploy an application to Kubernetes that you get these kind of things. But they are very useful to distribute load and to make your applications more resilient. And they're very easy to configure for the whole company. But you don't want every team to do that individually. One of the mindset that we used for this is we said these libraries, these templates, they are products. They're not just some code that we push away and something that we will never look at again, or we won't maintain it. We were actively going to maintain this. And because it is a product, we also versioned it. First of all, we made sure that we didn't break it, but if we break it, we could always go back to a different version, such that it kept working. And we tried to unit and integrate test as much as possible. You might think, how do you unit test a library? You can actually do that, even with pipelines. If you have a pipeline that's running, you can write a unit test for your pipeline. So every time you make a change, your pipeline starts running, testing your pipeline. And that makes it so much more reliable. So we've gone through the piloted phase. We said, for this example, this is a good pilot. We have people that want to use it. And we also see the benefit on a really long term by facilitating this kind of a product to the organization. So we had this sort of middle out approach. We were in the sweet spot. And now it was time to build it. Because we were not there yet. We were just starting. And in the build it phase, it's very important to throw away everything that you have, which is not always that easy. This might be a project that you've already worked on for a couple of months, that you already invest a lot of time in, but that project contains assumptions, it contains legacy already, and after this point, you will not be able to do this without a complete rewrite of your product. And now you don't have that many users yet. So this is the time to throw everything out and start over. And really think about the design. You should have that time when you're building it. This is also the time to involve your early adopters. These early adopters, they are going to test your product. They are going to be your core users. They are going to be all around through the organization. They're not going to be that many, but you're going to be very close with them when you're developing it. So you're going to have maybe every week you're going to have a meeting with them to see if what you're developing still fits their needs. And you're going to automate all your manual tasks. Because if you don't automate this early on, you will never be ready for that scale it phase. You will get into big problems. A couple of challenges to keep in mind. The first one is a scope creep. You might have something that is the organization really wants. And there might be people that say, hey, this is so nice, I see this project going really well. I want a piece of that. I also have this thing that I want to get implemented by the whole organization. I'm just going to put it in that product. But it's not actually the scope that you started with. This was not what you wanted to solve when you started with the project. So keep a lot of focus on which problem we're trying to solve, and try to focus on that. Don't scale too fast. Normally, you can get a lot of pressure from a lot of users. They want to use it, and you really have to be ready for scale. But if you do this too fast, you will fail in the next phase. So make sure that you have a really stable solution before you're going to scale it. And you have to be open to change. It doesn't mean that whatever phase you are in, that you can say, no, this is it, and we're not going to change it anymore. One of the challenges that we had in ING adopting these kind of solutions was duplicate solutions. There were actually multiple teams that figured out at the same time, we need something to accelerate this cloud adoption. And multiple teams actually came with a very similar solution. Obviously, they were different. They had some different implementations, some different use cases, but they were doing in the end the same thing. Now, the idea is that you sort of figure this out in the piloted phase. That's when you want to get together and find each other. What are we making? And can we sort of combine forces? Well, we didn't do that. and we actually had to spend a lot of time fixing this in the build it phase, where we needed a lot of collaboration sessions to make sure that all the use cases that all these different teams, it was not 2 teams, it was more teams, to make sure that they were actually combining their forces in making one product. Now, obviously, if you do this way later on, it's even going to be way worse, because if you end up in the scale it phase with multiple solutions, you have a whole bigger problem on your hands. So we've gone through this build it phase. Let's say we have a good amount of users. Let's say we have about 15% of the organization that is using it. And everybody's happy. It's a stable solution. And people are going to catch on. That's when you want to go to the scale it phase. And that's the holy grail. That's where we want to be. We want to scale to the rest of the organization. But this is also where it can be a bit overwhelmed. In the scale it phase, it's very important to channel your support. Because when you were still building it, you were working with your early adopters. There were not that many. But now you're working with an early majority, and that early majority is huge. I mean, in ING, we have 10,000 engineers. Imagine them all sending you an email of people are coming to your desk to ask you questions. You don't want to have that happen. So in ING, we also have many different channels of support, and we like using different of them, but at some point, you have to stick to one. Because you also don't want each of your engineers in the team to not being able to focus on their feature development anymore, because they constantly get questions from your users. You want to engage the community, and this can be very easily done with the early adopters. These early adopters are very happy with your product. They're your ambassadors. And they're going to spread this idea also across the company. And they might help with adopting this technology when you have a community set up. And you should have an excellent engineering journey. If you have documentation, it needs to be flawless. There's some really nice research done on how to write proper documentation for engineers. It's not just about writing a README or writing a wiki and everybody figure it out yourself. You really have to think about this. How do the engineers are going to use this product? And how do I make sure that they understand what they have to do when they read my documentation? And that's not a simple README. Because if they don't understand your documentation, they will come to you. There are a couple of challenges with this. Obviously, you need to keep your product stable, and you're not solving any problems if your solution is unstable. Don't try to get overwhelmed. What we had a lot was, especially on the support, people get a bit overwhelmed, and suddenly hundreds of people start asking questions, especially when you make mistakes. And we also have a metric for it. We try to never do more than 40% work on support. Now you might say, okay, but what if you get more questions than you can handle with 40%? Well, that's a metric. That's why we have that. When we get across that 40%, we're going to look at, okay, what are we doing wrong? Is our documentation incorrect? Is our journey incorrect? Is our tool unstable or not intuitively to use? These are all things you can think about it yourself. But don't start pointing and say, we need more engineers, or we need support engineers. That's not going to solve your problem. Maybe it's going to solve it for a few months. After that, the same problem is going to come back. You can go back and ask, hey, we need more engineers. And they'll ask, why? You just got more engineers. The problem didn't go away. Because that's not how you solve these kind of problems. And you have to stay flexible. You need to get your processes in place to stay flexible to changes, to requests, to a product that keeps changing. And yeah, I can admit that's complicated. A couple of things that we realized during the cloud adoption in ING is we had some growth pains. One of the growth pains that we had is when we initially started, we thought we were going to stick to one Azure region. We had a really good plan for this. We are using multiple Azure regions in ING, and we said, no, we'll never get users from other Azure regions. But we did. And we did this in the scale it phase. It was a very painful migration, I can tell you. It was hard-coded values, it was configuration, it was synchronizing. It was not a fun journey, and it took us really a lot of time. And another one was the feature request. We got loads of feature requests in the Scale It, and we could not handle them. And at first, we told everyone, hey, it's going to be on the backlog. Bye. But we realized this is not the way forward. We want to do these feature requests. They were really good ideas. And they were all coming from really good engineers. So we said, you know what? Our code is already accessible. From day one, we opened up our code. And we have what we call inner source products. It's sort of like open source, but then inside a company. And we said, you know what? Just create a pull request. And all that we do is we check it. And this actually led us to having more than 100 contributors outside of our team in our project. And after a few months, we could keep up. But that whole backlog of feature requests was gone because it was all already in there. And we could speed up so much. And we didn't need another extra team of more engineers to handle all those feature requests. So we've gone through all these phases, and now we are at really one of the last phases, the operated phase. The operated phase for the late majority. So we've gone our scale. Let's say we have 80% of our users, we have them on board. And now it's time to run a stable solution. And during the operated phase, it's very important to have your perfect monitoring in place. This is the time when you want to know when something is going wrong before it actually goes wrong. It's also where SRE practices come into place. You want to be very reliable. And this is also the time when you can actually focus on efficiency. In the scale-it phase, you were still growing. You could get away with just doing a lot of things, trying out a lot of new initiatives. But when you're operating a solution, it's also important to look at efficiency. Maybe you can reduce the amount of solutions that make it more simple, make it more efficient to use your product or to run your product. A couple of the challenges here is manage your dependencies. Dependencies is often where tools and technologies break. Not being aware of your dependencies, not knowing where they are. And you really have to keep stability in mind. Now, one of the things with incidents is it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It will happen, and you better be prepared for it. And when you're prepared for it, you know what to do. And remember that other slide about the monitoring? Pipeline monitoring is a real thing. But I don't see it that much in the industry yet. But when something goes wrong and your pipeline does something wrong, do you actually know that your pipeline caused it? Because we do a lot with application metrics. We do a lot with monitoring. We have this error codes. But what if something goes wrong in the pipeline? So with pipeline monitoring, we actually had an incident where something went wrong in the pipeline, made a mistake, oops, aligned with some other mistakes, and that meant that we had an incident. But one of the reasons why we could fix this fairly fast is because we had pipeline monitoring in place. We knew exactly which applications were being deployed with that faulty versions. We knew which teams it were, we knew their team names and their email address, so we could immediately notify them, hey guys, you have to redeploy. Because something went wrong on our side, but we can see that you deployed in this 24-hour time span, and that's when we had that bug in our system. And that's pretty much the tech adoption model. These are all the different models. I'm not going to go too much in the kill it phase. It's more about downsizing, and that's not that complicated on the strategies. There are a couple of things to watch out for. When you plot this model in a quadrant, and we have the pilot, the build, the scale it, and operate phase like this, there's something called the phase plant. And this is when you go directly from pilot to operated. This can happen from the push that you get from management. They say, oh, this is a pilot, it's so amazing. We saw this vendor at a conference, and they said that this tool is going to save all our problems, going to solve all our problems. So put it in production right away, and we'll send an email that people just have to use it. If you don't go through these phases, the people are not going to know about it. You will not validate your assumptions. You will not have a scalable solution. People would probably not even know about the solution. And that's what we call the phase plant. They normally fail quite fast. They get sometimes they are being kept alive somewhere. The next one is the flameout risk, because when you go from pilot to scale it too fast. Now remember, in the build it phase, it was very important to properly set up the processes, to also properly set up your organization around these processes. How do you develop these things? How do you deal with these features? How do you make sure that you are ready for scale it? If you don't do that and you end up in the scale it phase, you're going to get a lot of user pains. They are going to run into problems. Your product is not usable. There was no time for you to properly understand the solution that you were trying to bring to the organization. And this also normally creates a lot of noise in the organization, where people heard about it, then they want to scale it already, and it's not ready yet. And the last one is a lost opportunity risk. This is actually when you have a good solution, but you're just going to skip the scale it phase completely. So you think, well, this is going to be ready for the whole organization, and it's going to go right into an operational phase. This is when you have, challenges normally with capacity. You will not be able to handle all of that. You never went through a scale it phase. And you're going to have quite some build issues in there. This is also normally what happens when you have half products being pushed to production. And the proper strategy is called the long way around. You really need to take time for these different phases. And when you are building a solution, it's also good to do this kind of temperature check. Where am I? Where is my product now in the phases, and what do I have to pay attention to? And if you think you are in the scale it phase and you realize, oh, I'm actually in the build phase, then try to adjust to that. Try to focus on the problems that you want to solve during that phase. Because it's a bit, it might be very tempting to go to the scale it very fast. Now, a couple of the lessons learned. People are receptive to very good solutions. When you have a good idea or you have a good technology that you want to use, people want to use it. That doesn't mean that you have to go too fast through the process. It's really important also if there's a lot of demand to go through these steps very gradually. Different phases can mean different people. If you have the different phases, your organization changes. But the thinkers are not normally always the people that operate it. Obviously, there's flexibility in there, but it's really good to understand that sometimes if the team changes, that's not a bad thing. It can be a good thing to really bring your product to the next maturity level. Keep being open to new ideas, but keep your eye on the target, because you started with solving a certain problem. It's very good to think about, am I still solving that problem? It's also very important to not become the next problem in your organization. If you start becoming that dependency, then maybe other people are going to build tools to fix the problems that you create. It's a bit of a weird cycle. And apply the structure of the technology adoption model. And that leaves me with the slide that I started with. We obviously, I'm not doing this alone. I maybe stand here talking about this subject, but there are a lot of people who are working on this. And we really did this together, and that's why I think that we accelerated very fast to cloud adoption. That's it. Thank you for listening. Any questions? Yes. You have a microphone?
Thanks for the nice talk. It was really interesting. Could you give us some pointers how to create perfect documentation?
I think if you treat documentation like you treat your products, you can make a lot better documentation than what I see happening now. So first of all, documentation should always be in code. When you create pull requests, make sure that your documentation changes are in that pull request. You can enforce that with some policies. Don't allow pull requests which don't also have changes. There are some really nice talk. Yeah, I should have put it on here, but please reach out to me later. There's a really nice conference talk somewhere about how to write technical documentation and about the different parts. Yeah, I should have had it on here, but there are ways, and there's a lot of research done, but the research is not that known in the tech industry because we focus quite a lot on building new solutions instead of using solutions.
Yeah, thanks again, Wouter. Great session. I'm going to use the F word. How do you fund it?
How do I fund what?
How do you fund the platform team? How do you make sure you got the resources necessary to provide these capabilities to the rest of the org?
I think that's one of the things which was earlier in the model to getting the sponsors. So yeah, if you're talking about how we fund the whole cloud platform, yeah, I think we can do this as ING because we are big enough.
So is there a chargeback, or like, how do you measure the value that you're delivering?
Yeah, that goes maybe a little bit more into our internal charging model that we use in ING. But yeah, there's definitely, if we use global solutions, it's definitely the consumers. Yeah, it's not a free-for-all show.
You mentioned that you encountered others with the same initiative and then had to work together or solve it. How did that work? Or how did you solve that?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to repeat the question. I'm not sure if the microphone worked, but how do we find how do we manage to solve the whole duplicate situations, duplicate applications? We got together. We said, what are actually the differences? We tried to make some different sheets and what is one tool doing better and what's the other tool being better, and can we combine it into one solution? And then at the end, two teams integrated into each other to solve it into one solution. But it required a lot of discussions and collaboration.
I can do it without the microphone. Okay.
Okay.
Can 10,000 developers. I don't know how many companies or guys you're working for 10,000 developers. So is there an exact moment, let's say a number or something, where we need to change your mind and start working in this way? Or is it something that you can is suitable also for companies that have, let's say, 5 developers?
I would say 5 developers is a bit too few. But I would say that if you get to a certain number, maybe 100, is definitely good to start thinking in maybe platform approach, because this is in the end what we're doing with this. We create platform teams to keep the complexity away from development teams. There's a really nice book about it called Team Topologies. So there's not direct number, but definitely when you get too big, when there's complexity and a lot of overhead, I think that's when you want to start thinking about going more towards this approach.
Thank you.
Hi, great talk. My question is quick, is on how do you buy time? During all these phases, you obviously engineers like have to develop products that business will make money fast with them. Mm-hmm. How do you buy time, get them to have that patience and justify while you still building this internal capability?
Yeah, good question. It's a lot about understanding each other. Obviously, there's always a business demand to do things faster, and it's important for that business to also understand that if you skip certain steps, that at some point it's not going to be faster and it's definitely not going to be cheaper. So a lot of this is about, really a mutual understanding about that you need time to go through certain stages for proper adoption. I think at some point, if the business will realize that if you go too fast, you're going to create a technical debt, and you're going to have to pay for that with interest.
Hi, thank you for your talk. It was very useful. So where do you draw the line? I mean, so the model you explained, felt very similar to a PaaS. So you basically built a platform and you abstracted a lot of complexity away from your developers. But would you do that again, right? So, and in terms of your pipelines, how do they look like? Do developers have control over infrastructure as code? And then you have, you're using OPA or something to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, or even that is abstracted away, because often it's a fine line that we have to maintain between agility and stability, right? So would you do that same thing again, and how did you manage the provisioning in public?
Yeah, good question. I would definitely do it again. And actually, there's a nice presentation. I put a QR code here on how actually all our stuff works technically, and also where is that line. Because, yeah, there is definitely a line between what the users can do and what we extract away. And even from the things that we abstract away, how they can still influence that. But there's definitely a line from things that we don't want people to touch. Like pod anti-affinity, the teams are not allowed to touch that. It's never a good idea to not use pod anti-affinity. But it takes a lot of collaboration, also with the architects, with the experts, to understand where are these things where we say we want no flexibility between the parts where we do want flexibility in these kind of solutions.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, I really enjoyed the talk. I missed a bit in which phase you realized that there are other teams working on the same or trying to solve the same issue. Were there already like products? Did you have to choose which one to keep, or like did you start from the beginning, like deciding which features to use, or like you had to choose which product you had to evolve from the different teams?
Yeah, we definitely did not start over. The phase was in the build it phase, so we already had multiple solutions that were quite far in their process. They were definitely not piloting anymore. And it really took a lot of collaboration together to really make it into one solution. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, like between the teams, did you like had to fight, like with, you know, like?
Yeah, we played some Counter-Strike. The team that won that could keep their... No, we didn't have any fights. I believe we had a very healthy culture. We really looked objectively at what is the product. We also involved a lot of the users that were using both products to see, okay, what is good about this product, what is good about that product. So it was not just a discussion between the two teams who were building this. But that's also, again, why the whole process takes a lot of time when you really do it at that late phase. I believe there is a...
I can shout. You started with talking about private cloud on OpenShift.
Mm-hmm.
Then later on you hinted at Azure and Azure regions.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about what you use for private and what you use for public and how that evolution will be?
Yeah, a good question. And I didn't have it on this slide. So actually the blue blocks is where we have Azure DevOps, and the orange box is what is ING. So Azure DevOps is our Azure repositories, our pipelines, all that kind of thing. And the moment that people deploy, that goes into our private instance.
Okay, so you have no workloads.
No, not in this ICHP part. No more questions? Then I would like to thank you for listening.